You are welcome to class this afternoon. My name is Mrs. Jane Okulu, and this week we are going to be talking on the human respiratory system part 2. Don't forget, last week we talked about the respiratory system part 1. So this is a part 2 of it. And at the end of the class, I expect every one of you to be able to describe the respiratory system of a fish and the gaseous exchange in fish. Then you should be able to explain respiratory system in man and describe the process of inhalation and exhalation. Now let's take a look at the respiratory system in fish. Last week I told you that the fish make use of the gills for their own respiration. And the gills, they are located on both sides of the fish head beneath the operculum. So the operculum is the one protecting the gills because the gills is also a delicate organ that needs to be protected. And there are typically three or four gills arranged in the gill chamber, which is close to the operculum. And the gill has something we call the gill filament. And the gill filament, this is where the gaseous exchange takes place, while the gill recars block food particles and an arc helps to support the gill filaments. Now, when the fish breathes, it closes its operculum. This is a process of respiration now. When a fish breathes, it closes its operculum and opens its mouth. And then it lowers its mouth floor, allowing water with oxygen to flow in. The fish then closes its mouth, raises the floor of the mouth, and moves water over the gills. Then oxygen diffuses into the gills while carbon dioxide moves out into the water. The fish then opens its operculum and releasing the carbon dioxide laden water. That is, carbon dioxide that is already mixed with water is being released out of the fish through the operculum. This process repeats for each breath. Now let's take a look at respiration in toad. The young toad is called the tadpoles. You all know the life cycle of a toad. So the young one of a toad is called tadpoles, and the tadpoles basically they are aquatic organisms. They live in water. That's what aquatic organism means. They live in water, and because they live in water, they also make use of their gills. Because I know most of you will be wondering, oh, Miss Jane, toad, are they not supposed to be using their lungs instead of gills? And that is why I told you that the young ones of the toad, they are called tadpoles, and they are basically aquatic organisms. And because they are aquatic animals, they make use of their gills. Take a look at the picture on your screen. You can see their gills. So at the tadpole stage, the animal develops external gills through which direct diffusion of gases takes place between the animal and the respiratory medium, which is the water. Oxygen dissolved in water can easily diffuse into the body, and carbon dioxide can also easily diffuse out of the body by simple diffusion process. Now, the young toad uses external gills for the young toad called the tadpoles make use of external gills for breathing. At this stage, gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged directly through the gills through diffusion. This is efficient due to the large surface area of the tadpole's body. And as the tadpoles grows, the external gills gradually disappear and internal gills form under a covering called the operculum, allowing the tadpole to breathe more like a fish. I hope you understand that. Now, let's take a look at respiratory organ in man. Obviously, you all know, last week I told you that man make use of the lungs for their own respiration. Mammals like birds and lizards, they make use of their lungs for gaseous exchange. And the lungs, they are reddish. They are elastic organs located on each side of the heart within the thoracic cavity. So you are all familiar with the thoracic cavity. So the lungs, they are on each side of the thoracic cavity. The thorax, which houses the lungs is supported by a bony framework made up of the sternum, the backbone, the ribs, and the diaphragm. And because the lungs is also a delicate organ, and that is why it is being protected by the thoracic cavity. Now, the diaphragm separates the thoracic and the abdominal cavities and the ribs connected by the intercostal muscles to form a protective cage around the heart and the lungs. And why are they forming protective cage? Because the heart and the lungs, they are delicate organ that needs to be protected at all costs. Now, let's take a look at respiratory system in man. The human respiratory system consists of the nostrils, the pharynx, the larynx, which is the voice box, the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe, the bronchi, the bronchioles, and the alveoli. So air enters into the nostrils and moves to the pharynx. Then from the pharynx, it moves. Just take a look at the picture on your screen. You can see that air moves in through the nostril. As it moves through the nostril, it enters the pharynx, and from the pharynx, you can see an arrow going into the larynx, and from the larynx into the trachea. And you can see the epiglottis rather prevents food from entering the airway during swallowing. So the epiglottis is the one that differentiates the pathway of food and that of the air we breathe in. The trachea splits into two bronchi, which have cartilage rings for support. Then the bronchi branch into smaller bronchioles that lead to the alveoli. And at the alveoli, that is where the exact gaseous exchange takes place, not in the lungs now. The alveoli is the point in the lungs where the major gaseous exchange takes place. And the alveoli, they are surrounded by blood capillaries and are connected to the outside environment through a continuous airway. Now, let's take a look at the process of inspiration, or you can say inhalation. Is either you call it inspiration or you call it inhalation. Now, when you breathe in, what happens? That's what I'm trying to say now. Immediately you're breathing in, the first thing that happens is that the thoracic cavity first increase in volume. You all know what the thoracic cavity means. This place, the thoracic cavity increases in volume. Then the diaphragm, you all know your diaphragm here. The diaphragm contracts and become flattened. Then the intercostal muscles contract. The sternum, which is the breastbone, is moved forward. Then the ribs are moved upward and outward. And as a result of this, there's an increase in the volume and a decrease or fall in the pressure of the thoracic cavity. And consequently, air from outside is drawn into the lungs or into the alveoli through the nose, the trachea, the bronchioles, and the bronchi, leading to an increase in the size of the lungs. That's the process of the inhalation in man. Now let's take a look at the process of exhalation. The following process are involved in during exhalation. It's just the opposite of the process of inhalation. So the first thing that happens during exhalation is that the thoracic cavity first decrease in volume. Unlike in inhalation where it increases in volume, here it decreases in volume, then the diaphragm relaxes. It relaxes and it assumes its dome shape back. It assumes the dome shape back. Then the intercostal muscles relax. The sternum moves inward instead of outward. It moves inward. Then the ribs are moved downward and inward also. And because the ribs are moved downward and inward, there is an increase in the volume and a decrease in the pressure of the thoracic cavity. And consequently, the air containing waste like your carbon dioxide, like water vapor from inside the alveoli of lungs, they are forced out through the bronchioles and the bronchi, the trachea, and finally they are moved outside through the nose. That is the process of exhalation in man. Thank you. Okay, you have an assignment here. You briefly describe the process of respiration in toad. You give me the function of the lungs. What is the function of lungs in the respiration process? Then you highlight the process of inhalation in man. Thank you for listening. For any question, you can direct all your questions to me at jane.okolo@greenland.org. I'll be willing to answer all your questions. Before then, have a good day. Bye.